What if the life you've been living, chasing success, comfort, and approval, has been empty all along? What if every achievement, every accolade, every moment of pride has been nothing but a shadow of what your heart truly craves? I was living that life, restless, searching, feeling hollow even when everything seemed perfect. And then I found the light of Islam, not as rules to follow, but as a truth that awakened my soul, gave purpose to my struggles, and turned my fear into courage. Islam didn't just change what I did, it transformed who I am, who I want to be, and what I fight for. Today I stand firm, not because the world applauds, but because my heart is alive, illuminated by conviction, faith, and purpose. And what I've learned is simple. The awakening of your heart isn't just a journey. It's the only journey that matters. What if the moment you thought you were lost was actually the moment your soul began to awaken? What if everything you believed was broken in your life? The disappointments, the confusion, the loneliness, was not punishment, but an invitation from the divine, calling you back, whispering softly, "Come home." For me, that awakening didn't come wrapped in light. It came through darkness. It came through the quiet ache of nights when the noise of the world faded, and all that remained was the echo of my own emptiness. I had success by the world's measure, comfort by its standards, but no peace within. I was surrounded by everything, yet hollow inside. And it was in that hollowness that the first spark of Islam touched me, not as a religion of rules, but as a revelation of truth. Islam didn't knock politely at the door of my heart. It broke it open. It forced me to face questions I had buried deep. Who am I? What is the purpose of all this striving, this constant chase for approval and power? Why do I feel restless even when I've achieved what others only dream of? The light of Islam didn't just answer those questions. It stripped away everything false until only truth remained. What if the greatest miracle isn't in seeing angels or witnessing divine signs in the sky, but in seeing yourself change? Islam took the chaos within me and rearranged it with precision. Where there was arrogance, it planted humility. Where there was anger, it sowed patience. Where there was doubt, it built conviction. And suddenly, the noise of the world, the distractions, the politics, the endless scrolling, the shallow slogans, began to sound hollow compared to the voice of the Quran echoing inside me. When you begin to awaken through the light of Islam, it doesn't feel like you're adopting something new. It feels like you're remembering something ancient, something your soul already knew before your mind caught up. You realize that faith isn't blind. It's the only vision that sees clearly. And in a world where morality bends with every headline and truth shifts with every opinion, Islam stands firm, unshaken, unapologetic, radiant with certainty. What if the heart that beats within you isn't just a biological organ, but a compass that has always pointed toward its creator? But you've been too distracted to notice. The heart doesn't find peace in wealth, pleasure, or fame. It finds peace in remembrance. When I discovered that, I stopped running from silence. I started running toward it. Because in silence, I could finally hear the one who never stopped speaking to me through the signs around and within. That awakening didn't make life easier. It made it real. Suddenly, every action carried meaning. Every prayer became a conversation with purpose. Every hardship became a test of strength. Islam didn't promise me a life without pain. It promised me that my pain would have meaning. It taught me that faith is not about escaping the storm. It's about learning to stand firm in it, with your heart anchored to something unshakable. And yet, the most shocking part of all this wasn't how Islam transformed me. It was realizing how long I had been asleep. How I had mistaken comfort for peace, pleasure for purpose, and noise for life. The light of Islam revealed that the world's promises are glitter without gold, sound without substance. True wealth is not in your wallet, but in your worship. True freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's having the strength to do what's right, even when no one's watching. What if your awakening is waiting for you too, hidden behind your next heartbreak, your next failure, your next quiet night of wondering what it all means? Because that's when hearts are ready. That's when Allah turns your pain into clarity, your confusion into direction, and your emptiness into light. When Islam enters your life, it doesn't just give you faith. It gives you back yourself. The version of you that was meant to live with purpose, stand with dignity and walk in the light, no longer chasing the world, but guided by the one who created it. What if everything you've ever blamed the world for, your failures, your regrets, your lost potential, wasn't the world's fault at all? What if it was yours? What if the true chains holding you back weren't around your hands but around your heart? Chains of laziness, excuses, and spiritual blindness that Islam came to shatter. That realization hit me like lightning. Because Islam didn't come to comfort the careless. It came to awaken the responsible. It didn't tell me to sit back and wait for miracles. It told me I had to move first. I had to act. I had to take responsibility for the state of my soul and the direction of my life. When I truly began to understand that, something inside me changed. The world no longer looked like a playground of blame. It became a battlefield of purpose. What if your failures are not punishments but mirrors, showing you who you've become when you've stopped holding yourself accountable? The Quran doesn't sugarcoat it. Indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. That verse doesn't just speak, it confronts. It looks straight into your excuses and tears them apart. It says, stop waiting, start becoming. And that's where Islam struck me hardest. It didn't allow me to be a victim of circumstance. It made me an author of consequence. Faith, I realized, is not a cushion. It's a call to rise. Islam doesn't raise dreamers who sit and wish. It raises believers who act and trust. It doesn't make you a slave to fear or fate, but a warrior of self-mastery. Every prayer, every fast, every moment of reflection is a discipline, a training ground for your will, your integrity, your courage. When I began to live with that awareness, I stopped blaming society, leaders, even destiny. Because Islam made one thing brutally clear. You can't complain about the darkness if you refuse to light your own lamp. What if the true test of faith isn't how much you believe when life is easy, but how much responsibility you carry when it's hard? Islam teaches that accountability begins with the self. Before you question the world, you question your heart. Before you correct others, you correct your own actions. And in that process, you find liberation, because responsibility is freedom disguised as burden. The more you own your choices, the more power you gain over your life. That's the kind of empowerment Islam offers, not the loud, hollow empowerment of slogans, but the quiet, unshakable empowerment of discipline and faith. The shocking thing is how many people run from this truth. They want faith without obedience, freedom without restraint, paradise without effort. But Islam doesn't deal in fantasies. It deals in reality. It says every action counts, every word matters, and every intention is weighed. You can't fake your way through life when you believe that every deed is being recorded, not by cameras, not by society, but by angels who see what no one else does. That realization is both terrifying and electrifying. It wakes you up. It makes you live differently. What if the greatest revolution is not out there in the streets, but inside you? When your heart decides to stop surrendering to weakness. When you understand that prayer isn't just ritual, it's responsibility. That fasting isn't just hunger, it's discipline. That charity isn't loss, it's purification. Islam trains you to rule yourself before you ever try to change the world. It teaches you that the strongest person isn't the one who conquers others, but the one who conquers his own ego. And when you conquer that, everything else falls into place. Peace, clarity, direction. Before Islam entered my life deeply, I thought freedom meant doing whatever I wanted. Now I know real freedom is having the strength to say no. No to temptation, no to laziness, no to anything that drags my soul away from its purpose. Faith and responsibility go hand in hand because belief without action is just illusion. The Prophet didn't sit waiting for change. He became the change. And that's the model Islam gives every believer, not to escape the world, but to lead it with conviction. What if every prayer you've whispered was not a plea for help, but a command for you to move? What if Allah is not ignoring your struggles? He's waiting for you to rise through them. That's what faith with responsibility means, walking through the fire and trusting that the one who lit it will guide you through it. Islam didn't just teach me to believe, it taught me to build. To build myself, my character, my legacy. It's not a passive faith, it's an active mission. What if everything you've been taught to chase, the fame, the money, the applause, the image of success, was actually a trap? What if the light you've been following your entire life wasn't light at all, but a dazzling illusion designed to blind you from the truth? The world today is louder than ever. Voices shouting from every direction, telling you what to buy, who to be, what to believe. It's a storm of opinions, a chaos of desires. And in the middle of that storm, the light of Islam stands still, silent, clear, unmoved, a lighthouse for those who have lost their way. I once thought modernity meant progress, that the more advanced we became, the more enlightened we were. But what if we've mistaken information for wisdom? What if our screens glow brighter, yet our souls grow darker? The shocking truth is that we are living in a time of abundance but drowning in emptiness. We have everything at our fingertips, yet peace feels more distant than ever. We scroll for hours but still can't find meaning. We speak endlessly, yet no one listens, not even to themselves. Islam, when it entered my life, cut through that noise like lightning through a storm. It showed me that light isn't found in pixels and progress, but in guidance, divine, timeless, and pure. What if the real darkness isn't outside, but inside? We call it modern confusion, but it's really spiritual starvation. A world that's lost its connection to its creator will always try to replace faith with philosophy, morality with opinion, truth with emotion. And that's exactly what's happening today. We live in an age where everyone wants to be their own God, defining their own right and wrong, rewriting nature, erasing accountability. But when man plays God, the result is not freedom, it's chaos. Because when there's no higher truth to anchor us, everything becomes negotiable, even humanity itself. That's when the light of Islam becomes more than belief. It becomes rebellion. A rebellion against the decay of values, against the worship of the self, against the emptiness of a world that confuses desire with destiny. Islam doesn't bend with the winds of fashion or opinion. It stands tall, the same truth that guided deserts and dynasties, the same truth that still guides hearts today. It doesn't evolve to please people. It refines people to please God. And that's what makes it so shocking, so powerful, so necessary. What if the comfort you cling to is the very thing keeping you blind? The modern world sells comfort as happiness, endless entertainment, endless consumption, endless distraction. But Islam reminded me that comfort can be a curse if it makes you forget your purpose. The Quran doesn't promise ease. It promises meaning. And meaning is born in struggle, in waking before dawn to pray when your body begs for sleep, in holding your tongue when anger burns, in giving charity when your ego screams to keep it. That's where the real light lives, not in the glamorous, but in the disciplined. And it's that discipline that the world now calls old-fashioned. Faith is mocked as primitive, modesty as oppression, morality as restriction. But what if those things are not chains, they're shields? What if the boundaries Islam sets are not walls to imprison you, but walls to protect you from the flood of a godless culture that wants to drown you in temptation and call it freedom? Every verse, every command, every principle of Islam is light, not the kind that flatters the eyes, but the kind that awakens the heart. What if the true enlightenment isn't in questioning God, but in questioning yourself? When I began to live Islam sincerely, I realized that the light was never far. I had just closed my eyes to it. The Quran didn't suddenly start glowing. I did. The same verses I had heard before began to pierce deeper. The same prayers I had said before began to feel alive. The modern world had convinced me that happiness was somewhere out there, in success, in approval, in achievement. Islam taught me it was always within, in submission, in remembrance, in sincerity, and that realization shook me. Because for the first time I understood that truth doesn't change. People do. The light of Islam has always been here, steady through centuries of empires, revolutions, and philosophies. It doesn't flicker with time. We do. And the moment you step back into that light, you see the world differently. You see that the chaos isn't as strong as it seems. It only looks powerful because people have turned away from the truth that could silence it. What if this entire age of confusion is not a curse, but a test? To see who will still recognize the light when the world is drowning in artificial glow? Because those who do, those who hold on to Islam amidst this noise, they don't just survive, they shine. They become beacons in a world that has forgotten what real light feels like. The kind of light that doesn't just brighten your path, it transforms your soul. What if the strength you've been searching for was never meant to be found in power, politics, or prestige, but in people bound together by faith, compassion, and purpose? What if the true force that holds humanity together isn't wealth or technology, but the heartbeat of a united community, one that lives by values, not vanity? The world today glorifies independence, isolation, and the myth of self-sufficiency. But when I looked deeper through the light of Islam, I discovered something shocking. The strongest person is not the one who stands alone, but the one who stands with others, bound by truth and mercy. We live in an age where community has been replaced by connections, millions of followers, zero real friends. People post smiles while their hearts crumble in silence. Families sit together but stare into separate screens. Humanity has never been more connected, yet more disconnected from what truly matters. What if this modern illusion of togetherness is actually the greatest loneliness ever known? Islam shattered that illusion for me. It reminded me that community, ummah, is not about proximity, it's about purpose. It's not built on convenience, but on conviction. When I began to see Islam not just as personal faith, but as a collective mission, everything changed. I saw how every command in Islam carries a social heartbeat. Prayer in congregation, fasting as a nation, charity for the poor. These are not rituals of isolation, but blueprints of unity. Islam doesn't just create believers, it creates brothers and sisters. It doesn't raise individuals who compete for fame. It raises souls who cooperate for good. And that realization hit me harder than anything else, because I realized how far the modern world has drifted from that. What if our weakness today isn't because we lack resources, but because we've lost our values? Look around. Communities collapsing under selfishness, families breaking under ego, neighbors living side by side yet living separate lives. We've replaced empathy with efficiency, compassion with convenience. Islam came to heal that fracture. It commands believers to care, to stand for the oppressed, to visit the sick, to feed the hungry, to forgive the flawed. Because a society without mercy isn't a civilization. It's a machine. I remember the first time I saw a Muslim community truly living those values, the sense of belonging, the dignity, the peace in shared worship. It was shocking, almost foreign, in a world that teaches you to look out only for yourself. But in that togetherness, I felt something ancient awaken, the kind of unity that no amount of technology or talk can create. It's the unity that flows from shared belief, from kneeling shoulder to shoulder in prayer, from breaking bread with strangers who feel like family. That's the community Islam builds, not just a group of people, but a heartbeat synchronized by faith. What if the cure to the world's chaos isn't in more laws or leaders, but in returning to these values of mercy and justice that Islam commands? A community rooted in faith is one where no one is left behind, where the strong protect the weak and the wealthy lift the poor. But a community without faith becomes a marketplace. Everyone sells, no one serves. That's why the Prophet said, "The believers in their love, mercy, and compassion for one another are like a single body. If one part hurts, the whole body feels the pain." Imagine living in a world like that, where the suffering of one truly matters to all. But here's the shocking truth. We used to live like that. Centuries ago, Muslims built civilizations that welcomed scholars and strangers alike, where justice wasn't for sale and where charity wasn't optional. It was identity. They built not because they were perfect, but because they were united. They believed that no nation could rise if its hearts were divided. And today, that message burns brighter than ever. Because while the modern world builds higher towers, Islam still builds stronger. What if we've been taught the wrong definition of strength all along? The world says strength is domination, but Islam says strength is compassion that doesn't waver. The world says unity comes from power, but Islam says it comes from shared purpose. The world says stand above others. Islam says stand with them. And when you live that truth, you begin to see the miracle of community, how 1,000 hearts can beat as one. how mercy becomes might, and how faith turns ordinary people into guardians of one another. The light of Islam doesn't just guide individuals, it binds them. It reminds us that faith is not just personal salvation, it's collective responsibility. When one believer smiles at another, helps another, prays for another, they're not just spreading kindness. They're strengthening the fabric of humanity itself. Because Islam doesn't build walls between people. It builds bridges of meaning, love, and justice. And those bridges, once built, can outlast empires. What if the revival we're all waiting for isn't going to come from governments or systems, but from communities rediscovering the light of Islam, people who choose unity over ego, compassion over pride, and faith over fear? That's the community I saw. That's the community Islam calls us to build. And when that awakening happens, the world won't just see Muslims. It will see the reflection of what humanity was always meant to be. What if the very thing the world fears most, standing firm in your beliefs, is exactly what saves your soul? What if courage isn't about fighting wars or facing enemies, but about refusing to bow when the entire world demands your silence? In an age where truth has become negotiable, where people trade principles for popularity and faith for acceptance, Islam teaches something terrifyingly beautiful. That conviction is the highest form of freedom. The courage to stand by your faith is not arrogance. It's awakening. We live in a time when being true to your values feels almost rebellious, when saying this is right or this is wrong can make you an outcast. The modern world preaches tolerance, yet it tolerates everything except conviction. It wants believers to be silent, modesty to be hidden, truth to be softened. But what if the purpose of your faith is not to blend in? It's to stand out. What if your difference is your divine duty? Islam doesn't ask for quiet believers. It calls for hearts that roar with truth even when the crowd mocks them. The first time I truly understood this, it wasn't in comfort. It was in conflict. I realized that believing in Islam meant you couldn't live with one foot in truth and one in the world's approval. You either stand with Allah or you fall with everyone else. And that realization shook me. Because courage in Islam isn't loud, it's steadfast. It's the quiet strength to say no when everything around you says yes. It's wearing your identity with pride when others hide theirs in shame. It's praying in public when people stare. It's holding on to morality in a time that celebrates sin. What if the greatest act of bravery today is not to raise your voice, but to raise your values? To remain pure in a polluted culture? To defend your beliefs when they're mocked, misrepresented, or misunderstood? Islam doesn't promise comfort for the courageous. It promises clarity. It doesn't promise applause. It promises peace, the kind that lives in the heart of those who know they've stood firm for something eternal. When I started standing up for my faith, people called it stubbornness, but I saw it for what it was, strength. Because Islam doesn't ask you to please the world. It asks you to please the one who created it. What if fear was never meant to weaken you but to reveal who you trust? Every time you face ridicule, rejection, or resistance for your faith, it's a test, not of your strength, but of your sincerity. The Prophet and his companions stood against nations, empires, armies, yet their greatest battles were not fought with swords, but with patience, dignity, and unwavering faith. They didn't compromise truth for convenience. They didn't soften Islam to make it acceptable. They carried the message like fire, burning, unfiltered, pure. And because of that, hearts across the world still light up from their flame. But today we hide that flame. We whisper our beliefs where we should declare them. We fear the mockery of people more than the judgment of Allah. What if that fear is exactly what chains us? The world tells us to be ourselves, yet demands that our faith be invisible. Islam teaches the opposite, to be humble in ego but bold in truth. To walk softly but carry conviction like a banner. Because true courage isn't found in defiance, it's found in devotion. The shocking thing about courage in Islam is that it's not meant to make you superior. It's meant to make you sincere. When you stand for truth, you're not fighting the world. You're freeing it. You're showing that morality still matters, that purity still has value, that faith is not outdated, it's timeless. And every time a believer refuses to compromise, the world is forced to remember that truth still exists. What if every challenge you face is not a barrier, but a stage where Allah watches how much you truly trust Him? The stares, the judgment, the rejection, they're not punishments. They're proofs that you have something worth standing for. And once you embrace that, the fear fades. You start walking differently. You speak differently. You stop apologizing for your faith and start living it unapologetically, unshaken, unmasked. The world may call that arrogance, but Islam calls it conviction. And conviction is contagious. One person standing firm in faith can awaken 1,000 others who were too afraid to speak. One believer with courage can reignite an entire community's strength. That's the power of standing firm. It spreads. It reminds others that Islam was never meant to be hidden behind closed doors. It was meant to be lived in broad daylight, proudly, peacefully, and powerfully. What if every generation that loses its courage loses its faith? Because faith without courage is just silence dressed in fear. But when courage and faith unite, they create light. A light that defies the darkness of doubt and the pressure of conformity. That's the kind of courage Islam demands. The kind that doesn't shout, it shines. The kind that doesn't just survive opposition, it grows stronger through it. And once you find that courage within your heart, no power on earth can shake it, and no darkness can ever put it out. You said, what if everything you thought life was about, wealth, comfort, approval, even survival, was only a rehearsal for something far greater? What if your real purpose, the reason your heart beats, the reason you wake each day, was not to accumulate, impress, or endure, but to awaken, to live a life so purposeful, so intentional, that every action becomes a reflection of the divine? That was the revelation that struck me when I truly embraced Islam, and it was nothing short of shocking. For years, I moved through life like a ghost in a machine. I chased milestones, collected achievements, and counted successes. Yet each victory felt hollow. I asked myself why, and for the first time I was honest enough to admit the truth. I was living for the world, not for my soul. And what Islam showed me was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. It said, you are alive but not living. You are breathing but not present. You are chasing shadows, but the light is within reach. What if your life is meant to be a journey of intentional action rather than passive existence? Islam taught me that every moment is sacred, every choice is significant, and every deed carries weight. This is not just ritual, it's revolution. To live Islam fully is to understand that your life is not a series of random events, but a canvas where every brushstroke matters. The Quran does not tell us to drift through life. It calls us to build, to rise, to act with purpose. And when you start seeing life this way, every second becomes both terrifying and electrifying. The shocking truth is how little we understand this. We live in an age of distraction, of busyness mistaken for productivity, of motion mistaken for meaning. The world celebrates activity but ignores impact. Islam forces you to pause and examine. Why are you doing what you are doing? Are you living for fleeting applause or eternal significance? Are you wandering aimlessly? Or are you walking a path illuminated by purpose? It's uncomfortable because it strips away excuses, comforts, and illusions. What if your suffering, your failures, even your mistakes were not setbacks, but signposts? Islam reframed my understanding of life entirely. Every hardship became a lesson, every mistake a guide, every challenge a test. Not to punish, but to elevate. The world tells you to avoid pain at all costs. Islam teaches you to embrace it, refine it, and transform it into strength. Real purpose isn't found in the easy, it's forged in struggle, in persistence, in turning adversity into growth. And here's what shocked me most. Purpose is not discovered by waiting for inspiration, it is awakened by action. The Quran repeatedly commands the believer to act, to strive, to use their talents, their intellect, their wealth, and their time for something greater than themselves. This is where life shifts from passive existence to active awakening. No longer are we merely surviving days. We are crafting legacies, sowing seeds that echo far beyond our own lifetimes. What if the meaning you've been searching for isn't hidden in extraordinary feats, but in ordinary acts done with extraordinary intention? Islam teaches that a single kind word, a moment of honesty, A prayer said sincerely, or help given selflessly carries infinite weight. Your life is not measured in public recognition, but in divine awareness. Every choice matters because everything is being recorded, everything has consequence, and nothing done with sincerity is ever lost. That realization is shocking because it removes the veil of insignificance. Suddenly, even small moments are monumental. The modern world tempts us with shortcuts, comfort without discipline, pleasure without consequence, success without integrity. Islam challenges all of that. It asks you to live deliberately, to measure your days, to rise early, to pray with attention, to give generously, to love intentionally. And when you start living that way, life itself begins to glow differently. Decisions gain clarity, relationships gain depth, hardships gain purpose, and even ordinary routines transform into acts of worship. What if awakening isn't something that happens once, but something you cultivate every day? Islam showed me that purpose is a muscle. You strengthen it by action, prayer, reflection, and service. And the more you strengthen it, the more alive you feel, the more capable you become of touching lives beyond your own, the more your heart expands with gratitude, patience, and resilience. It's a shocking paradox. The more disciplined your life becomes, the freer your soul feels, and ultimately, what if the life you've been searching for, the one filled with joy, peace, and meaning, isn't out there at all? But inside you, waiting to be awakened, Islam revealed that the light of purpose isn't discovered in fame, wealth, or worldly acclaim. It's cultivated in the heart, nurtured through faith and lived through action. The world may try to blind you with noise, chaos, and temptation, but when your heart awakens, nothing can dim that light. Every step, every breath, every choice becomes part of a larger journey, a journey that transforms not just you, but everyone your life touches. What if everything you thought you knew about happiness, fulfillment, and success was upside down? What if the very things you've been chasing all your life, approval, wealth, comfort, recognition, were actually barriers between you and true contentment? The world teaches that satisfaction comes from accumulation, that joy is bought, that meaning is earned externally. But Islam confronts all of that with a revelation so shocking it shakes you to your core. Happiness is not something you find outside. It is something you awaken inside. For years, I ran in circles, thinking I was living a good life. I chased career milestones, social validation, fleeting thrills, and distractions to fill an emptiness I didn't fully understand. Every victory came with a hollow echo. Every applause faded before the next moment. And then the light of Islam hit me like a tidal wave. It didn't whisper promises of comfort or instant gratification. It demanded honesty. It forced me to look at myself and ask, why am I so restless? Why do I feel incomplete even when the world says I have everything? What if the restlessness you feel is a signal, not a flaw? What if your dissatisfaction is actually a divine nudge pointing you towards something real, something eternal? Islam taught me that the human heart is designed for connection, not connection to possessions, not connection to fleeting fame, but connection to the Creator, to truth, and to purpose. Until you awaken that connection, every pleasure is fleeting, every achievement hollow, every moment incomplete. The world can give you abundance, but it cannot give you fulfillment. Only awakening the heart can. The shocking thing is how countercultural this is. In a society obsessed with self-gratification, instant results, and visible success, Islam calls for patience, reflection, and surrender. It asks you to turn inward, to recognize that your soul's hunger cannot be filled by the world's empty offerings. Every prayer, every act of worship, every effort to do good becomes a doorway into a deeper satisfaction that the world can't touch. True happiness, I realized, isn't about what happens to you. It's about what happens within you. What if every struggle, every hardship, every challenge you face is not a punishment, but a pathway? Islam doesn't promise life without pain. It promises life with meaning, and meaning transforms suffering into opportunity. When I embraced this truth, everything I once feared, failure, rejection, uncertainty, began to feel different. Pain became a teacher, not a thief. Disappointment became a compass, not a curse. The world had told me happiness is found in comfort, but Islam revealed that real joy often lives in endurance, gratitude, and conscious awareness? What if the moments you consider insignificant? A kind word, a prayer whispered in solitude, a small act of charity, are the very moments that carry eternal weight? The light of Islam taught me to value intention over outcome, process over product, heart over hollow reward. Every act done with sincerity, no matter how small, becomes part of the awakening of your soul. And that realization is shocking because it flips the modern definition of success on its head. You are not measured by what you own or achieve, but by the depth of your heart and the sincerity of your actions. The modern world sells a life of distraction, but Islam calls for presence. It shocks you by asking, are you truly living or merely existing? And when you answer honestly, the contrast is staggering. Life lived for the world is shallow. Life lived for the heart is profound. Islam doesn't ask for a retreat from life. It asks for a recalibration. It teaches you to see the sacred in the mundane, the eternal in the fleeting, the profound in the ordinary. A meal, a conversation, a walk, a breath. Everything becomes an opportunity for awakening when your heart is illuminated. What if happiness has nothing to do with circumstances and everything to do with perspective? What if joy is not an external reward, but an internal state cultivated through faith, reflection, and devotion? Islam revealed that the heart, once awakened, does not depend on fortune, recognition, or comfort. It depends on sincerity, presence, and connection with the divine. And when that light enters your life, everything shifts. Scarcity feels abundant, hardship feels purposeful, solitude feels complete, and the chaos of the world no longer controls your inner peace. The truly shocking revelation is that happiness was never lost. It was always there, waiting for recognition. The world told me to seek it elsewhere, to chase it endlessly, to measure it by standards that never satisfied. Islam showed me that happiness is not found in the accumulation of things, but in the awakening of the heart. A heart that knows purpose, a heart that trusts the Creator, a heart that sees meaning in every breath. And once you experience that, every moment of life, no matter how ordinary, begins to shimmer with light, and the restlessness that once consumed you is finally replaced with peace. As I reflect on this journey through the light of Islam, I realize that awakening the heart is not a one-time moment. It is a lifetime of choosing truth over convenience, courage over comfort, and purpose over fleeting distractions. Islam has taught me that faith is not passive. It is action. It is not just belief. It is responsibility, community, and unwavering conviction. And when you allow your heart to awaken, you don't just change yourself. You influence the world around you. You uplift others. And you become part of something far greater than yourself. Good luck and thank you. Message, I want to leave you with this. May your hearts be guided, your purpose be clear, and your courage be unwavering. Good luck on your own journey of awakening, wherever it may take you. Thank you for listening, for opening your hearts, and for taking a step toward the light that transforms not just lives, but the world itself.